One ordinary morning is about to turn into a headline, a ringing phone, a tense voice, and a decision that will change the course of her life. The morning had begun like any other, wrapped in a cocoon of familiarity and calm. Sunlight filtered through the half-open blinds of Claire Donovan's small but cozy kitchen, scattering stripes of golden light across the marble countertop. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air, mingling with a faint aroma of toast she had just buttered. She was still in her pajamas, a worn gray t-shirt and plaid flannel pants, the kind of outfit meant for slow, lazy mornings. Her plan for the day was simple. Catch up on some emails for her freelance graphic design job, maybe run to the store for groceries, and spend the rest of the afternoon reading the novel she had been meaning to finish for weeks. Claire valued this kind of quiet. Life in the small coastal town of Seabrook was slow, predictable, and safe, exactly how she liked it. The only background noise came from the rhythmic crash of waves outside her apartment building and the occasional cry of gulls circling overhead. The world beyond her little bubble felt far away, its chaos muted by distance. She had just settled into her favorite chair by the window with her coffee mug when her phone buzzed against the table. The sharp, vibrating sound broke the stillness, and she frowned when she saw the caller ID. Unknown number. Normally, she would have let it ring. Telemarketers, wrong numbers, scams. They were all the same to her. But something made her pick it up this time. Maybe it was a strange instinct that whispered this call might be important, or maybe it was just idle curiosity. "Hello?" she answered, her voice casual. The reply was immediate, but it wasn't casual at all. "Is this Claire Donovan?" The voice was male, urgent, and tight with stress. "Yes," she said slowly. "Who's calling?" "This is Dispatch, Seabrook Emergency Services," the man said, speaking quickly. "We have an active situation, and your presence is required immediately." Claire blinked, trying to process the words. "Required? I think you have it wrong." "Ma'am," he cut her off. "This is time sensitive. Are you currently at your residence on Harbor Street?" Her heart gave an involuntary thud. "Yes, but—" "You'll be briefed on arrival," the voice said, his tone clipped professional, but threaded with urgency. "We need you at Seabrook Community Center right now. It's a matter of public safety." The call ended before she could respond. She stared at the phone in her hand, her coffee cooling on the table. This had to be some kind of mistake. She wasn't a police officer, a firefighter, or anything remotely connected to emergency services. She was just Claire, ordinary, invisible Claire, the kind of person who faded into the background. Why on earth would 911 be calling her? Her first instinct was to shrug it off. Probably a prank, she told herself. But the man's tone had been too sharp, too precise to be a joke. And he had known her address. The air in her apartment suddenly felt different, heavier, charged. She stood up, pacing the kitchen as she debated what to do. Every rational part of her brain screamed to stay put, but another part, quieter yet insistent, urged her to go. Curiosity, maybe, or the unsettling sense that ignoring the call might be a mistake she'd regret. She grabbed her jacket, slipped on sneakers, and locked her apartment behind her. The streets of Seabrook were bathed in soft mid-morning light, the air tinged with the scent of salt water. As she walked quickly toward her car, she noticed a few neighbors outside. Mrs. Harlow watering her plants, Mr. Jensen sweeping his porch, and for a moment, everything looked exactly as it always did. Normal, peaceful. Yet, as Claire slid into the driver's seat, she couldn't shake the feeling that normalcy was already slipping away. The Seabrook Community Center was only a 7-minute drive from her apartment, but the trip felt longer. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds as if she expected something or someone to be following her. She kept replaying the dispatcher's words in her head. It's a matter of public safety. What could possibly be happening that required her? When she turned onto Bayview Avenue, she spotted Community Center ahead, a squat brick building with a faded mural of fishing boats painted on its side. But what made her slow down wasn't the building itself. It was a scene outside. Two police cruisers sat parked at odd angles, their light bars flashing silently. A white van marked Seabrook EMS was stationed near the entrance, and a handful of uniformed officers stood in a loose semicircle, their attention fixed on someone just out of Claire's view. She pulled into a parking spot at the far end of the lot, her pulse quickening. As she got out, an officer, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing mirrored sunglasses, immediately spotted her and walked toward her with purpose. "Claire Donovan?" he asked, his voice brisk but not unkind. "Yes," she said cautiously. "Come with me. The chief wants to speak with you." And just like that, she was being led toward the cluster of officers, her mind racing with questions. She had no idea that this short walk across the parking lot was the first step into a story that would not only shake her quiet life to its core, but also make her name known far beyond Seabrook's borders. She sat there for a moment after the line went dead, the phone still pressed to her ear, as if waiting for the voice to return. The rational part of her brain told her it was a wrong number, a glitch, or maybe even a prank. Yet the way the caller had spoken, so urgent, so certain, made it impossible to shake off. She replayed the words in her head, each syllable hitting differently now that the call was over. How did they know her name? More unsettling, how did they know where she lived? She set the phone down on the kitchen counter, trying to steady her breathing. The smell of her coffee was still in the air, its steam curling lazily toward the ceiling, but it no longer felt like part of her morning. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was still early, too early for anyone to call unless it was serious. Her first impulse was to dismiss it, just delete the number, make another cup of coffee, and pretend nothing happened. But curiosity was a stubborn thing. She picked the phone back up, scrolling to the call log. No number, just the word unknown. She frowned. That didn't happen often. A shiver ran through her. She told herself it was just because of the strange timing, the eeriness of being contacted by someone she couldn't identify. But another part of her, the deeper, instinctive part, knew this wasn't random. The voice had been too calm and too precise for that. She moved to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peer outside. The street looked normal. A few cars were parked in their usual spots, and a jogger trotted past on the opposite sidewalk. No one was watching her. No one was standing under the streetlight or lingering near her door. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, keeping track of her movements. Her phone buzzed in her hand, making her flinch. A text message appeared. No number again. Just a single sentence. "Don't ignore this. We need you." She read it twice before her fingers began to move. "Who is this?" she typed. No reply. She waited a full minute, staring at the screen as if willing it to light up again. Nothing. She was about to set it down when another message arrived. This time, it was just an address, one she recognized, though she couldn't immediately place why. She opened her laptop, pulling up a map. Her stomach tightened. It was an old municipal building across town, one that had been converted into something else years ago. She remembered reading about it, but the details escaped her. Why there? And why her? She paced the kitchen, the debate in her head growing louder with every step. She didn't owe anyone anything. This wasn't her problem. And yet, the mystery of it all was like an itch she couldn't stop scratching. Against her better judgment, she grabbed her keys. The drive across town was uneventful, but her mind wasn't. She kept replaying the voice in her head, trying to place it. Male or female? Old or young? It had been steady, deliberate, but layered with something heavier, almost like fear but controlled. She pulled onto the street where the building stood. The place looked abandoned from the outside. Faded paint, boarded up windows on the second floor, and weeds pushing through cracks in the sidewalk. She parked across the street and sat in the car for a minute, scanning the area. No one seemed to be waiting for her. Finally, she stepped out, her shoes crunching against the gravel. She crossed the street, the air strangely still for this part of town. When she reached the door, she hesitated. It wasn't locked. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Sunlight streamed in through cracks in the boards covering the windows, creating narrow beams across the floor. Her footsteps echoed in the emptiness. "Hello?" she called out, her voice bouncing off the walls. No answer. She walked deeper inside, her phone in her hand, ready to call someone, though she had no idea who she'd even call if things went wrong. Then she heard it, a faint tapping, like fingers drumming on a surface. She froze, listening. It came again, this time from the far end of the hall. She followed the sound, her pulse quickening. When she turned the corner, she stopped short. A man was standing there, dressed in plain clothes, his hands resting on an old wooden table. He didn't look surprised to see her. In fact, he looked like he'd been expecting her. "You came," he said simply. Her mouth went dry. "You're the one who called me?" He nodded. "We don't have much time." "Time for what?" she asked, her voice sharper now, more defensive. He gestured for her to follow. "I'll explain, but not here. We're already being watched." She wanted to demand answers right then, but something about the way he spoke, low, urgent, certain, made her move without arguing. He led her to a side door, and they stepped into a narrow alley that smelled faintly of oil and damp concrete. He glanced up and down the street before guiding her toward a car parked just around the corner. Once inside, he finally turned to her. "You think this is a mistake. It's not. We know who you are, and we know you're the only one who can help us." Her heart pounded. "Help you with what?" He hesitated, as if weighing how much to tell her. "Someone's life is in danger, and if we don't act fast, you might be—" The voice on the phone had left her with no room to hesitate. The location was burned into her mind, the urgency in the dispatcher's tone still echoing in her ears. She grabbed her keys, barely remembering to lock the door behind her, and slid into the driver's seat. Her hands were trembling as she turned the ignition, the engine's roar feeling far too loud for quiet tension pressing down on her. Streetlights blurred past as she drove. The early evening sky streaked with the fading colors of sunset. Every turn felt like a step deeper into something she wasn't sure she understood. The directions repeated in her mind, over and over, guiding her toward a part of town she rarely visited. She noticed the first signs that something unusual was happening about 10 minutes in. A pair of police cruisers racing past her in the opposite direction, lights flashing but sirens oddly silent. Then another sped by, heading toward where she was going. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened. Whatever was happening, it wasn't small. As she approached the main intersection near the location, the faint wail of distant sirens reached her ears. Then came the glare of emergency strobes bouncing off nearby buildings. Traffic began to slow, drivers craning their necks to see what was going on. The unease in her chest deepened. She wasn't just heading toward an accident or disturbance. This felt like something coordinated, something that had drawn more than just local law enforcement. A news van shot past her, weaving through traffic with reckless urgency. The logo on its side was from a major regional network. She hadn't seen them move this fast for anything short of a high-profile disaster or crime. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder, startling her. She glanced down. It was an unknown number again. Without thinking, she answered. "Are you close?" The same voice from before. "I'm almost there," she said, eyes flicking between the road and the blinding blue and red flashes ahead. "What's going on?" "You'll see. Just remember what I told you. Park where you can, but don't draw attention to yourself. And keep your phone on." The call ended before she could ask anything else. Her gut was screaming at her now. Every instinct told her she was walking straight into the middle of something she shouldn't be part of, But curiosity was already winning. She wanted to know why she'd been called. She needed to know. When she finally turned onto the street, the scene hit her like a wave. Police cars lined both sides of the road, their light bars strobing against the buildings. Yellow tape flapped in the breeze, cutting off a sidewalk. Fire trucks were parked at odd angles, hoses snaking toward a building she couldn't fully see yet. Clusters of onlookers had gathered behind the barricades, their murmurs blending into a low hum of speculation. News crews were unpacking tripods and shouting to their cameramen. She slowed, scanning for any sign of what was happening, but there were too many people, too many flashing lights. Finally, she caught sight of it, the building at the center of it all. The front entrance was partially collapsed, smoke curling out from a jagged opening. Paramedics moved with practiced urgency, wheeling out stretchers. A police officer barked orders to a group of firefighters disappearing inside. She pulled into a spot a block away, killed the engine, and just sat there for a moment, heart pounding in her ears. It was chaos, but not the kind she'd ever been this close to. And it was the kind of chaos you didn't get called to by mistake. As she stepped out of the car, the evening air hit her, carrying the acrid scent of smoke mixed with something metallic. Her eyes darted to the news crews. Several were already broadcasting live, their anchors speaking into cameras with grave expressions. She slipped her phone into her pocket, keeping her head down as she joined the outer edge of the crowd. Nobody seemed to notice her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting for her to arrive. Then, over the noise of sirens and chatter, she heard it again, her phone vibrating. She answered quickly. "You're here," the voice said, more like a statement than a question. "Yes," she whispered. "Now tell me, why am I here?" There was a pause. Then, "Because this is where it all started." The line went dead again. Her pulse quickened, eyes scanning the scene. Somewhere in that smoke-filled building, something was happening. Something that tied her to this chaos in a way she didn't yet understand. And whatever it was, she was already in too deep to turn back. The moment she eased her car into the nearest available parking spot, she could feel the shift in the air. The crowd wasn't just gathered, they were watching, even from behind her windshield. She could sense the weight of their attention, as if her arrival had been anticipated. A few people craned their necks, others nudged companions and murmured. She blinked, unsure whether it was her imagination, but the pattern was too clear to ignore. She stepped out, closing the door behind her. The metallic clicked louder than it should have been. The summer air was heavy with a mix of gasoline fumes from idling vehicles, the metallic tang of hot pavement, and the faint scent of something burnt. Her eyes swept over the scene. Yellow police tape cordoning off a large section of the street, uniformed officers stationed at intervals, and behind them, an almost theatrical arrangement of media vans, camera tripods, and reporters rehearsing their stand-ups. Flashbulbs popped occasionally, even though no one seemed to be posing. The heat was oppressive, yet she felt a chill crawl up the back of her neck. The first responder closest to her, a paramedic crouched near an ambulance, looked up, recognition flickering across his face. His gaze held a second too long before returning to his work. Another officer, mid-conversation with a colleague, paused when she passed by, eyes narrowing slightly as if confirming her identity. She pulled her bag higher onto her shoulder and walked toward the nearest break in the tape. Her instinct told her to keep moving, to blend into the bustle, but there was no blending in. Every few steps, she caught another pair of eyes flicking toward her, studying her like she was part of the unfolding story rather than a bystander. A reporter with a sleek bob haircut and a press badge slung around her neck stepped into her path. "Excuse me," the woman began, her tone both polite and probing. "Are you—" She didn't finish the question because an officer immediately intervened, holding up a hand. "Not now," the officer said firmly, guiding the reporter back toward the press zone. The reporter didn't protest, but her expression was a mixture of curiosity and frustration. She took advantage of the distraction to keep walking, try and make sense of the peculiar reception. She had never been here before. These weren't her people. This wasn't her neighborhood. So how could anyone know her? At the center of the blocked-off area, a cluster of officials stood in a loose semicircle, their attention fixed on a pair of detectives speaking in low tones. Beyond them, she caught glimpses of something obscured by tarps and the looming shapes of emergency vehicles. The mood here was different from the outer edges. Quieter, heavier, more contained. Whispers drifted on the hot breeze. She caught fragments, her name, or at least it sounded like it. A man in a ball cap leaned toward his friend, muttering something she couldn't quite catch, before the friend gave a slow, knowing nod. Two older women standing near a lamppost seemed to watch her with equal parts pity and curiosity, their conversation halting the moment her eyes met theirs. She forced herself to keep her expression neutral. Though her heartbeat was rising, her mind raced for explanations. Had there been a mistake? Did someone post her photo online in connection with this scene? It felt impossible, and yet the certainty in people's stares suggested otherwise. At the corner, a young police officer blocked her path with an apologetic smile. "Ma'am, this area is restricted," he said. His tone was courteous, but carried an undertone of caution. "I'm here because 911 told me come," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The officer hesitated. "I understand. I'm just going to need you to wait here for a moment." She nodded reluctantly and stepped aside, positioning herself near a row of parked news vans. From here, she could see the anchors preparing for live hits, their faces made up and hair perfectly in place despite the heat. Several of them glanced in her direction between takes, some whispering to their crew members. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, half expecting another call from dispatch, but it was a message from a number she didn't recognize. "You shouldn't be here." Her stomach tightened. She scanned the crowd instinctively, wondering who had sent it. There was no follow-up, no name attached, just that single unsettling sentence. Across the street, a tall man in a dark suit caught her eye. He wasn't in uniform, nor did he look like press. His posture was too deliberate, his gaze too fixed on her. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. Instead, he gave the smallest nod, as if acknowledging something they both knew, but she didn't. Before she could decide whether to approach him, another officer approached from behind and gently tapped her shoulder. "Ma'am, they're ready to speak with you," he said. His voice carried a subtle edge, as though he was both inviting and escorting her at the same time. She followed him through a narrow opening in the tape, her steps feeling heavier with each stride. As she passed the onlookers, the murmur seemed to swell, a tide of speculation and hushed tones. She didn't know what they thought they knew, but it was clear they had already cast her in a role she didn't understand. Inside the cordoned area, the sounds of the crowd faded, replaced by the sharper, more clinical noises of the investigation. Radios crackling, camera shutters clicking, clipped conversations between officers. She could feel every eye tracking her progress toward the center. One of the detectives, a woman with sharp features and an unblinking stare, stepped forward. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice calm but deliberate. "We have a few questions. And you might want to prepare yourself. This isn't going to be easy." The words hung in the air like a warning. Somewhere beyond the circle of officials, something was waiting. Something that had already made her the focal point of this tense, sweltering scene. And whatever it was, the crowd outside seemed to know before she did. The crowd's murmurs didn't fade as she pushed forward. If anything, they seemed to grow louder, weaving into a strange, tense hum that pressed against her ears. People didn't just glance at her, they watched. Some with narrowed eyes, some with tight-lipped sympathy, others whispering into the shoulders of those beside them. She kept telling herself she was imagining it, that this was just the way people reacted to anyone connected to an active emergency. But deep down, the unease settled like a stone in her stomach. The officer who had met her at the barricade walked slightly ahead, carving a path through the massive onlookers. His steps were brisk, almost impatient, and he didn't look back to check if she was keeping up. She had to lengthen her stride just to match him. Every now and then, she caught the flash of camera phones lifting in her direction, the click of shutters, the faint whir of video recording. It was absurd. Why would anyone care enough to film her? She wasn't the injured party, wasn't official, wasn't even sure why she'd been called here in the first place. When they finally broke through the press of bodies, she saw the heart of the scene. Paramedics knelt on the pavement beside a man sprawled against the side of an ambulance, his breathing shallow, his skin pale. Medical bags lay open, gauze and tubing spilling out. A second ambulance's rear doors were flung open, its interior glowing under harsh fluorescent light. 2 more medics worked inside, their movements sharp and efficient. A firefighter stood nearby. Radio pressed his ear, while a plainclothes detective paced in tight circles, his brow furrowed. Her guide stopped short and turned to face her. "Wait here," he said, his tone clipped. But before she could answer, someone else spotted her. A woman in a dark blazer, clearly not part of the emergency crew, stepped forward. Her eyes widened just slightly, but enough for the reaction to register. "It's you," she said under her breath, almost like she didn't believe her own words. The woman's expression shifted quickly, smoothing into something more professional, but the damage was done. The whisper was already floating in the air, caught by others nearby. Heads turned again. More murmurs. Her pulse quickened. "What's going on? Why am I here?" she demanded, her voice tighter than she meant it to be. The blazer-clad woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped aside, gesturing toward the man being treated on the ground. "Do you recognize him?" She hesitated. At first glance, the man's face was unfamiliar. Blood matted in his hair, his jaw shadowed with stubble. But then something in the curve of his cheekbone, the slope of his brow, caught her. A flicker of memory pushed forward. Her breath stalled. It couldn't be. "Think carefully," the woman pressed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "David." The name was enough to make the woman's shoulders drop in faint relief, but the look in her eyes said this wasn't good news. David Hale. She hadn't seen him in over a decade. Back then, they'd been inseparable. College friends who weathered the storms of exams, bad apartments, and heartbreaks together. But life had splintered their paths. The last time she'd heard his name, it had been through someone else, and the news hadn't been positive. "He asked for you," the woman said, glancing toward the medics. "Specifically you. Said you'd know what to do." Her head spun. "What to do? I'm not a doctor." Not medically," the woman cut in. "Something else. Something about access." Before she could ask what that meant, a paramedic looked up from David's side. "She's here," he called. "Bring her over." Her feet moved before her mind caught up. She knelt beside him, taking in the sight of a man who was both stranger and familiar. His lips were pale, but when he opened his eyes, there it was, that same sharp intelligence she remembered, dimmed now by pain. "You came," he rasped. She swallowed hard. "You called me?" He nodded, then grimaced. "I don't have much time. Listen carefully." The paramedic started to object, but David shook his head, and they let him speak. His hand fumbled for hers, gripping weakly. "You still have the old key?" Her mind flashed back to a worn brass key she'd once kept on a chain. "David, what?" "Don't let them take it," he interrupted. "Locker 318, at the Union Depot. It's—" A sudden fit of coughing tore through him, cutting his words short. The paramedic surged forward, checking vitals, calling for more oxygen. She leaned closer, desperate to hear the rest, but he was already fading. One of the medics shot her a look that said she'd need to move back. Reluctantly, she stood, her hands trembling. The blazer-clad woman was still there, her face unreadable. "What's in the locker?" she asked. "That the woman replied, is what we need to find out, and why you're now part of this. The hum of urgency wrapped around her like a suffocating fog. The air inside the operations tent was stifling. Too many bodies moving in a confined space. Too many voices speaking over each other. Too much heat from the banks of screens that lit up the room in restless blue light. She stood in the center of it, a single point in a storm of activity, as eyes darted toward her, waiting, measuring. Just minutes ago, she'd been on the outside, looking in. Now, she was the one everyone looked to for direction, and there was no script, no time to think. An officer shoved a tablet into her hands. On the screen was a live feed, blurry, unstable, but unmistakable. The face staring back was older than she remembered, harder somehow, but the eyes, those were the same. They belonged to the person she had once trusted more than almost anyone, a person she believed she'd never see again. The feed cut in and out, and each time it flickered to black, she felt a spike of panic. "They're running out of time," someone said beside her. "We need a decision now." She blinked, trying to push back the whirl of emotions. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she demanded, though her voice sounded far calmer than she felt. The lead official, a man with a jaw like carved stone and a voice that could slice through chaos, stepped closer. "You're the only one they'll listen to. We've tried every channel, every official, nothing. But if you speak to them directly, they might stand down. Or they might do the opposite." She shot back. "That's a risk," he said. "But the alternative is worse." The weight of the choice settled like a boulder on her shoulders. She glanced back at the screen, where the familiar face flickered into view again. In the background, she could see shadows moving, other figures whose intentions were impossible to read. The clock in the corner of the feed showed 12:03 p.m. She had less than 20 minutes. "Set up the link," she said finally. The room moved instantly, text pulling cables, adjusting audio feeds, opening encrypted channels. She sat down at the small table they had cleared for her, the surface cold against her palms. A microphone was positioned inches from her mouth, and a headset was slipped over her ears. "Once we connect, you'll have one shot," the stone-jawed official warned. "Choose your words carefully." She nodded, though the warning was unnecessary. She knew exactly how much was riding on this, and not just the officials in the tent. The screen changed. Static. Then the faint sound of breathing. And then, there he was, clear as day. He stared at her with an expression she couldn't immediately read. Part surprise, part something sharper. "It's been a long time," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years. "Not long enough," she replied before she could stop herself. A murmur ran through the room, but she ignored it. "You need to listen to me. This isn't the way." His eyes narrowed. "You don't know what I've seen. You don't know what they've done." "I know enough," she said. "And I know you're not the kind of person who lets innocent people pay for someone else's mistakes." Silence followed. She could feel the tension in the room like a pulled wire. Every person holding their breath, waiting for his next move. He leaned back, running a hand over his face, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, almost weary. "You think this is about revenge. It's not. It's about truth. And sometimes truth needs leverage." "That's not leverage," she said. "That's destruction." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then a sharp burst of static cut the connection, the screen going black. Technician scrambled, trying to reestablish the feed. She stood, her pulse pounding, and turned toward the official. "Get me back on with him. Now." But before they could respond, another screen lit up, this one showing the crowd outside. She was on it, live, her face filling the frame as an anchor's voice narrated her every move. They were already spinning the story, already shaping her into something she wasn't sure she wanted to be. "She's taking charge," the voice on the broadcast said. Unconfirmed reports suggest she has a personal connection to the situation. Her stomach tightened. Personal connection. That would spread fast. The link came back, and she dropped into the chair again. His face returned to the screen, the weariness gone, replaced by a sharper, more guarded look. "You're still here," he said. "I'm not leaving," she replied. "Not until we end this the right way." For the next 10 minutes, the conversation shifted between confrontation and negotiation. Her words tried to bridge the gap between the man she'd once known and the one she saw now. Every sentence felt like a step on a crumbling ledge. Around her, she could feel the media's gaze closing in, the story writing itself in real time. Finally, he looked away, exhaling heavily. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "After that, I can't promise anything." The feed cut again. In the tent, no one moved. No one spoke. She realized then that this wasn't over. Not even close. But the decision she'd made in the past 20 minutes had already locked the path ahead. There was no going back. And somewhere beyond the walls and cameras, the clock was still ticking.